You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll those dice.
Hello, Matt.
Howdy, Rob. We're back with perhaps our greatest episode ever. It's going to be a hot one.
Much requested, much delayed.
Yeah.
It is time at long last that the Dungeons Masters discuss. Well, it's time we talked about power gaming. Matt, have you talked to your kids about power gaming?
No, I haven't. It's a problem that's really ravaging our youth. We need no more satanic panics, and we need to talk about kids who is your child min-maxing.
That's right.
Check their text messages. Are they talking about dumping a CHA stat? They might be a power gamer.
Are they trawling through splat books? Are they multi-classing? Be aware of these dangerous behaviors and warning signs of power gaming. Your child could be among them.
Rob, speaking of power gamers, speaking of the worst people on the planet, I think you have a little dramatic reading for us.
Tremendous.
Just to kick things off, remind us the news of the world continues to go on.
One summer in the mid-1980s, Musk and his friend Theo Taushiani took Taushiani's father's car for an illicit drive. Musk and Taushiani were both in their mid-teens and lived about a mile apart in a suburb of Johannesburg, South Africa. Neither had a driver's license or permission from Taushiani's father, but they were passionate Dungeons & Dragons fans.
No.
And a new module, a fresh scenario in the game, had just been released. Taushiani took the wheel for the 20-minute drive to the Sandton City Mall. Elon was my co-pilot, Taushiani told me. We went under the cover of darkness.
True nerds.
At the mall, they found that they didn't have enough money. But Musk promised a salesperson that they would return the next day with the rest and drop the name of a well-known Greek restaurant owned by the Taushiani's family. Elon had the gift of gab, Taushiani said. He's very persuasive, and he's quite dogged in his determination. The two went home with the module.
Yes, Rob, if we needed any more proof that we live in the darkest timeline, it's the one in which the richest man on the planet and a huge asshole is a Dungeons & Dragons.
One of the most disliked and unpleasant and unignorable people in the world is a Dungeons & Dragons fan.
This is an OGL level. This is an AI. This is a Pinkerton's level fiasco for us as role-playing gamers.
This is bad. This is bad news.
Thankfully, hopefully, no one reads The New Yorker, though I'm scared because a lot of people read Ronan Farrow's excellent
this is a Ronan
journalism.
Farrow bit, which is unfortunate because if anyone reads anything out of The New Yorker, it's his interviews. So I'm afraid this may become more common knowledge as people finally pick up their New Yorker that's been languishing on their kitchen table for a week and turgidly flip through it before they realize there's a new Ronan Farrow piece to read from.
Yeah. However, we got to put, this is an anti-journalist podcast. We got to put Ronan Farrow on blast because he's not doing his due diligence here. We went through that whole paragraph and we skimmed through the rest of the article and doesn't say what the module is.
Does not say what the module is. Very disappointing. I would like to know what the module is.
Okay,
I think it's important. I think it's important to know what module Elon Musk and his, scion of Greek stolen wealth were so excited about in the mid-1980s in South Africa. I want to know.
Well, okay, so I'm on this, Rob. I'm going to do better than Ronan Farrow. I have sent this person a Facebook DM requesting the name of the module. I have not heard back. However, based on updates and other things available, doesn't seem like Theo is a frequent Facebook user. However, if I hear back, listeners, you will be the first to know, basically what, just like most other things in his life, what Dungeons & Dragons module Elon Musk most assuredly stole Like no one thinks he went back.
No,
and
he
paid
didn't
the
go back
next
to
day.
give him the money. Also,
I mean, that's what we think. Allegedly,
he loves video games and gaming, but he's a moron. Those of you who are Elden Ring players will remember that he posted his build in the height, and it was just an absolute dog shit mess of terrible ideas. We also know that he thinks chess is boring because there's no fog of war. So I can't imagine that his taste in D&D modules is very good.
Listen,
I tried to see.
I know our listeners are smart enough to get this, but I saw some people being like, "Yeah, that's right," and like I feel the need to explain. Like I'm overwhelmed with the need. Like chess is complicated because there's no fog of war. You have to outthink your opponent. They can see all the things you can see. They know a good opponent knows what your best move is just as you do. And so you've got to think ahead of it. It's infuriating. I sorry. I couldn't let that lie. It was driving me insane.
I am a fan of many games, but you can't win at chess by having higher like actions per minute. It's not StarCraft.
You can't out-tech them.
Yes. Like I love StarCraft, and I think it's quite a challenging game, but chess is actually more mentally taxing and interesting and challenging because it has fewer rules. It's actually there are diminishing returns on how challenging a strategic game can be. Anyway, I tried to see if I could narrow it down. It said they didn't have driver's licenses. Driving age in South Africa is 18. Musk was born in 71.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't really tell us anything. It just means that, mid 80s probably doesn't mean like 88 or 89. Ronan Farrow isn't, taking liberties here. So it's gotta be a module published, somewhere in the, 85 to 88 time range. We could try to narrow it down, but I really feel like I was let down by the New Yorker because I wanted to know which module it was.
I wanted to know the module too. Well, we know that Elon Musk, based on aforementioned Elden Ring build, is not a power gamer.
Oh, but Matt, he almost certainly thinks he's a power gamer.
Oh,
and this I think is going to be
the worst.
I think this is going to be an important part of our discussion because if you asked Elon Musk, "Are you a power gamer?" he would say, "Oh, yes, I optimize all of." Sorry, I don't even know what a South African. I can't do his terrible accent, but I do all the best things. I have the best builds. I optimize for maximum performance, like my cars and rocket ships.
And tunnels that are one lane roads under the city. Brilliant, sir.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Well, what does Elon Musk think he is, but he is not? What is power?
Anybody you ever seen do it screams from the haters. Got a nice ring to it. I guess every superhero need his theme music. No one man should have all that power. The clock's ticking, I just count the hours. Stop tripping, I'm tripping off the power.
The Bible tells us, quote, power gaming, also known as power space gaming, min-maxing, or optimization, is a style of interacting with games or game-like systems, particularly video games, board games, and role-playing games, with the aim of maximizing progress towards a specific goal. Other players may consider this disruptive when done to the exclusion of all other considerations, such as storytelling, atmosphere, and camaraderie. When focused on the letter of the rules over the spirit of the rules, it is often seen as unsporting, unfun, or unsociable.
That seems pretty straightforward. You all probably don't need to be told what power gaming is, right? You've probably experienced it or come across it or are familiar with it yourselves.
Or done it yourself, yeah.
But it's worth talking about because this question is one of the perpetual ones surrounding tabletop role-playing games especially, and there is and we'll get to this in greater detail later, this perception that there's a conflict between power gamers and role players, which continues to, the conversation around it, the debate, the discourse consumes the community. But I think power gaming is more complicated than that, Matt.
Yeah, I want to lay out some priors here, Rob. Like, where do you stand on this issue before we break down the nuances, or what's your personal experience with this issue? Because I feel like some people may have labeled at least some of my characters power gamey. I enjoy creating effective characters. I've also made ineffective characters, and I have to say I've enjoyed making the effective characters more. So maybe that makes me a power gamer. I don't know. Where are you?
I mean, on the spectrum, I'll happily lay out that I am a power gamer, and I love to make builds. I love to design characters. I love to find fun mechanical combinations and optimizations. Now, what this looks like for me is usually I find an idea that I think is fun and interesting, and then I work backwards from that. Any idiot can go online and find whatever the most maximum damage build is for any given system. But I think that there's a lot of fun. I have a lot of fun coming up with a cool idea and then trying to squeeze a lot of value out of it. Some of you will remember when Matt and I talked about some NPCs or characters that we had made. I had a wood elf barbarian that I thought was very funny, but that was a power gamed character. That character was able to achieve 18 armor class level 5 or something without wearing any armor by holding a shield and having high dex and using barbarian unarmored defense, and was able to move substantially further because of wood elf and barbarian proficiencies. But that wasn't a particularly powerful character. It would have been more powerful to make a half-orc or human with maximum strength and great weapon fighting. But that is power gaming. And that's the kind of thing that I like to do. And sometimes it does result in a very mechanically powerful character, but one that I usually think there's something interesting about it.
Yeah. I think maybe a little warning to listeners is that this episode, this conversation may come across, and we may end up sort of pinning a manifesto in defense of power gaming. But, we should recognize what are the limitations of optimization and, bring it back to what as we as DMs should respond to these types of tendencies within our players, especially within certain systems. But that's our perspectives. Both Rob and I enjoy creating optimized characters that are effective at some things. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. Or is there, Rob?
Or is there? Well, so before we go further, I want to lay out one more prior, which is that I think that this conversation with regards to 5e is silly.
Yeah.
Anybody who is concerned about power gaming in 5th edition is clutching their pearls a little bit too closely, in my opinion. You do not know what power gaming is like if you did not live through the late days of 3.5.
You never played Shadowrun 4e.
Yeah, you never played. Yeah, exactly. You never played 4th edition Shadowrun. You never had somebody go on the Paizo forums and explain how to build a pouncing, raging, mounted barbarian that could get 12 attacks around with a vigilant lance and do 12,000 DPS to the Torask. Like it's you just like nothing. There's no level of power gaming in 5th edition that holds a candle to what was possible either in previous editions of D&D or what is possible in other types of games. It's just, that's not to say that somebody can't make some really like min-maxed annoying builds in 5th edition, but it just is not, it's just not the same thing. It's just not the same thing at all.
Right. I feel like if we were still in 3rd edition of Dungeons & Dragons, or most people were playing Shadowrun or a similar system, this would be a more frequent topic of conversation. But you're absolutely right. Because of the nature of 5th edition, this is less of a conversation. But because of the video games, it's coming back, right?
It's coming back.
Is it a
Yes.
problem? So we've got 2 texts for you that we're going to draw from. One we're going to read directly from, and this is entitled, "Hey D&D Power Gamers, : I promise you'll have more fun if you don't min-max in Baldur's Gate 3 by Robin Valentine. And, both of us before this episode listened to a response to that video by the excellent game designer and seems like a cool guy that I want to be friends with, John Sawyer, designer of...
Josh Sawyer. Josh Sawyer, I want to, again, put this out on the table. I think of the people who are living who I might become starstruck by if I ever met them, Josh Sawyer is among a very small number of those. He worked on my two favorite top-down RPGs, Pillars of Eternity and Pillars of Eternity Deadfire. He worked on Pentiment and Fallout New Vegas, and just seems like a very smart and thoughtful guy who likes RPGs. So I am a big fan of his thinking on this. And if you haven't watched the video, it's a short, 10, 12 minutes, and he's got some very, very good thoughts on it.
Right. Link in the show notes. Back to Robin Valentine's article. Hey, Bauer gamers, you'll have more fun if you don't min-max. Let me read one of the key paragraphs here. There's something about D&D video games in particular that drives the urge to min-max, to pursue that perfect build. I can already see you all gearing up to do it in Baldur's Gate 3, and I get that. With a couple weeks left till launch, what else is there to do but pour over skills and feats? But I'm telling you now, you'll have way more fun in Baldur's Gate 3 if you don't min-max your character. Let me tell you why. Min-max D&D builds are all about the end goal, the level usually later on, where everything suddenly clicks. When you're making choices for your character for min-max reasons, you're not making choices for narrative reasons.
So I do want to stop on this because I think a lot of people read the title and didn't read any further, and I actually agree pretty strongly with Mr. Valentine on this particular point. I don't enjoy playing through an entire game, and I don't enjoy playing a character in a campaign that is waiting for a later level to be able to do the thing that they're supposed to be able to do. So even when I am power gaming, I want my character to come online at level 3 at the absolute latest. I want them to be able to do, whether it's cool attacks or some neat synergy. I don't want to wait until they're level 12 to get that. And I agree that if you are building towards a maximum level character in either Baldur's Gate 3 or in a campaign, you will not have fun, or you will not have as much fun as if your character were, useful from the beginning. So this specific part of power gaming, I do agree with.
Yeah, I think this is our first DM of none tip for dealing with power gamers as the game master. If you have a character or a player who enjoys optimization and creating complex or interactive builds between features, make sure that they understand that the expectation should not be your character is very not effective until level 5, 6, 11, right? Remind them that while they may have read online or in a forum that this is very, very cool, that the campaign is going to end probably around level 12, probably sooner because our schedules get crazy. So don't plan for the future. Live in the moment.
Yeah.
Okay, what about this? So the sentence in that really stood out to me is when you're making choices for your character for min-max reasons, you're not making choices for narrative reasons.
That I don't know is true. Now, I think it might be very interesting to build a character that is power gaming or power gamed and that doesn't come online till later, with the explicit intent of that being sort of a narrative development, that your character is spending 8 to 10 levels, figuring it out before they finally have their, hero moment and it all comes together. That might be cool. That doesn't sound fun to me. That sounds like it's a Baldur's Gate 3 is a long game. A campaign is a long time. If you are mechanically ineffective for a lot of that, with the intent of being mechanically effective later, that seems like no good. But I don't think that it's inherently like a narrative conflict to build for something that's going to be strong later.
Yeah.
That being said, I don't think most power gamers are doing that, but I could see how it could work that way.
I think this is a specific example of a general rule. And I'm going to cite here, Rob, the Stormwind fallacy.
Yes.
And of course you've heard of this, right? The Stormwind fallacy. I mean, we all have. It was posted on, minmaxforum.com in 2006. So by let's cite our sources here, by poster Tempest Stormwind, right? We're digging back to the ancient text.
A great poster Stormwind is? I don't know.
Yes. I am citing the deep magic for you. Don't say, also, Rob, never say a forum poster is great. You are opening a can of worms there that you're just like, oh, I love Stormwind or Tempest Stormwind and all their posts. You don't know what those other posts are.
You're
they
right,
could be bad.
Yeah.
All right. So it goes something like this. And here to quote from the Stormwind fallacy. Generalization 1. One is not automatically a worse role player if he optimizes, and vice versa. Generalization 2. A non-optimized character is not automatically role-played better than an optimized one, and vice versa. Like, I think these things are absolutely like true. Like, the thing about making an interesting mechanical decision, right? Even a min-max one, is that narrative and mechanics should not be separated in your mind. Maybe you chose the mechanic first and came up with a cool narrative after. Maybe you came up with a cool narrative idea first and then chose the mechanic after. At the end of the day, it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah. And we'll get into this later, but for Dungeons and Dragons specifically, I mean, it is a game that is largely about fighting. We have lamented and discussed many times that if you open up the PHB and you try to read the parts that are not about combat, you will have 1/4 of the book, if that, to read.
Yeah.
The rest of it is about combat. So there are lots of TTRPGs where you can be bad at all kinds of things. You can play an interesting character that's bad at all sorts of stuff, and it doesn't affect the game because the game is not about overcoming obstacles or defeating monsters or tactical combat. It's about moving the narrative forward. And so if you're a worthless dipshit who can't do anything, that's okay. But if you're, if you put 10s in all of your attributes and roll up a wizard who just throws knives or something, I mean, you may be having fun, like that might be entertaining to you, but it won't be effective, and it may not be fun for the rest of your group, and it's not inherently a better character, right, than a wizard who's good at casting spells.
Yeah. I think here's one of the larger issues is that I would say for 99% of players, especially in Dungeons and Dragons or Shadowrun, systems that tend to attract power gaming things, Pathfinder, most of those systems or most parts of those systems are pass-fail, right? Succeed or don't succeed. And most people, when given the choice between being effective and not effective, would gladly choose to be effective, right? It's more fun to succeed than to fail. There's no fail-forward mechanic in D&D, right? So, yeah, people are going to have more. Now, people might be like, well, I would rather be a wizard that throws knives or a smooth talking or a really smart fighter. But, the problem is there's less ways to express that and still be effective, still get those successes on checks.
And this is, not to get too deep into it, but this is actually, I think, one of the failings of 5th edition is that by removing so many options for mechanically optimizing, it doesn't really stop people from power gaming. It just limits a lot of otherwise interesting options, in my opinion. I think there's also like a lot less that you can do because Wizards wanted to make sure that there weren't as many tunnel fighter, tome of battle, chain whip guys running around or whatever like there were in 3.5, which wasn't an entirely like bad impulse, but it means that you also can't make a smart fighter, or you can't make a muscle wizard quite as interestingly as you could in 3.5.
Well, that brings us to the next part of Valentine's article, and where the author also talks about in earlier editions, just as you were saying, power gaming was easier. There were a lot more build options and things. And then to quote, but D&D has changed since those editions. Baldur's Gate 3 is based on 5th edition rules, not yet seen in many games, and which have substantially streamlined the whole process of building and leveling a character. With fewer mechanical choices and less escalation of numbers, meaning characters don't have to sprint to keep up with rising attack bonuses and to hit targets, there's much less potential to accidentally create a weak character. This means it's also much more forgiving of choices made for flavor instead of power. You won't feel a step behind if you want your fighter to be an intelligence sort, or for your wizard to wield a bow.
So here I have to disagree with Mr. Valentine on both his general point and on these two specific examples.
Yeah, I know. You pick the worst examples really out there.
You can make flavor choices, but what's particularly disappointing about 5th edition is that they don't really, like, you might as well just write that your character is smart on your character sheet for all the impact that it will have. Like, you can give your fighter 14 intelligence, and that will improve
being an Eldritch Knight.
Your nature and history rolls, which you're not proficient in because, I guess unless you took the right background. But like the overall impact is that you will succeed on those rolls, like, I don't know, 1 additional time out of 20.
Yeah.
And wizards can't even wield bows unless they have proficiency from some other source.
Being an elf or something like that.
Yeah. So,
and also, no wizard wielding a bow is ever going to be better at it. One of the things 5th edition does that I think people like wizard cantrips that never go away, is those are always going to be better than using a bow if you're a wizard.
Again, you could give your wizard 18 dexterity and be like, he shoots his bow, and it wouldn't be as good as casting Firebolt, right? Like, it just mechanically, and this is a frustrating thing. Again, in previous editions, if you gave your fighter 14 intelligence, you at the very least, you got more skill points, right? And there were feats and things that you could take to like build on it. And it wasn't very good. It was never very good. There's never been a good smart fighter, but there were options. You could be less bad. But if you give your fighter intelligence in 5th edition, you're just, I mean, you can continue. Here's the thing. You can continue to be effective. That is true. But it feels even more disappointing to make flavor decisions in a system like 5e because they have no impact whatsoever. Like I would prefer that you have to like dig through it to make a smart fighter. Like, either make it work or make it don't work, but don't split the difference. I'm forever mad that intelligence doesn't give skill points in 5th edition. I'm like, it's the most useless stat. Like it has, if you're not a wizard, there's zero reason to be smart. It's deeply disappointing. This is one of my least, I'm a big skill monkey guy.
Yeah.
This has always been like, and one of the things I did when I was starting to play Baldur's Gate 3 was I was like, oh, I don't ever get to be a player. So why don't I do what I always wanted to do and make a skill monkey? And then I spent a bunch of time doing that, and I was like, oh, this is fucking stupid. This is this is barely any different from not having any points in it at all. I should just be a bard and get jack of all trades, which is better than any amount of like min-maxing I could do to get skill points from a bunch of different places. Anyway, I'm going off.
I think, to bring it back to this specific problem here, I think what you're saying is, I think this is kind of true, is that a simplified system, right, just by, let's say, removing options, does not in any way solve the problem of expression of character or narrative choice versus mechanical choice. These things are disconnected. You can have a simple system with not a lot of choice that provides for very expressive role-playing or optimization choices. You can also have a complicated system that does both of those things equally well. I think there's a disconnect, even though it is connected in the minds of some, between simplicity and complexity and power gaming versus narrative. I don't think there's a connection between these two axes.
So yeah, what else? I think that's the sort of the crux of Valentine's article. And I don't want to go particularly hard on this person because I don't think it's a very controversial statement And I think
No, I think this is an opinion a lot of people share. I just think it's wrong. It's nothing personal.
I think the key thing, which I think was well intentioned, was to warn people not to look at like a completed, like go on a Reddit thread and be like, oh, here's a level 12 build with like 3 class dips that gets 15 attacks, and then try to build toward that without thinking about, would that be fun to play for however long Baldur's Gate 3 takes. That I think is a good impulse. The rest of it I think is misaligned, is not quite correct.
Well, equip all your wizards with bows. And I think this brings me to like my next DM tip for dealing with kind of the opposite side of power gaming, like under optimization. Like if a player is like, I really want to shoot a bow, like I love shooting bows, and then they roll up a wizard, maybe it's an elf wizard, or they took the feat that gives them martial weapon proficiency, and they're like, yeah, I'm shooting the bow, but they don't have any points in dexterity or something, and so they're missing 10% more, and maybe that's not a big deal, but that character, you will then have to be aware that character might feel less effective because mathematically they are. And as the dungeon master, I think you have a couple of moves you can employ here, right? It could be something as simple as giving them a magic bow-shaped wand that shoots their cantrip firebolt and shoots fire arrows, and they're like, actually, that's all I wanted. And then boom, problem solved. Or it could be being like, hey, it seems like you're really into shooting things with a bow. You rolled up a wizard because someone on the way over here said we needed a wizard. Maybe you actually want to play a ranger. Let's respec your character.
Yeah. I mean, the ultimate goal is for everyone to have fun and feel powerful, right? That is the point of D&D, or at least one of the points. Like, it is, there are games where it feels fun to be underpowered. D&D is not one of them.
Right.
What
there
that
are
means
games where
D&D,
you earn XP from failing. You make a character that fails a lot at the beginning, you level up and gain more powers.
Exactly.
Cool.
But what that means in other TTRPGs is something happens, right? There's a fail forward or a fail with consequences. But what that means in D&D is you just miss. You roll your D20 and nothing happens. And then you have to wait 5 minutes for the turn to come back around, and then you roll and you miss. That's not fun. That is not a good use of anyone's time.
Right. Think of it this way, Rob. In one of your Shadowrun campaigns, right, like one of the ones that I've played, would you let a player come to the table with an underpowered character?
No. I mean,
they would just die, right? What's going to happen.
I would try to encourage them. Anybody can do anything they want, but I would try to encourage them to find an angle where they would be effective at one thing. Right?
Yeah, that's
not
all.
Everybody has to come to Shadowrun with because you can spend unlike 5th edition, you can spend all your time min-maxing and figuring out rules and tweaking. But you should be good at something, right? And if you're not, you're gonna die or you're gonna get your whole crew killed, and that's less than ideal. And it's hard to run, right? It's hard to run as a DM. I think what's nice about 5th edition is that you can have a power gamer and just let's call them a casual in the same group and still run an encounter that's fun for everybody. What you can't have is a power gamer and somebody who's like deliberately unoptimized. That will be difficult to do. Other games, however, you do kind of need to have everybody with like a certain level of baseline competence, or it's just very difficult to balance encounters, balance challenges.
Right. And we've talked mostly about building characters as opposed to playing characters at the table. And I think this is where like some of our language about, like for me, being a power gamer, building a character or something, it's like, oh, you want to build a powerful character? That's cool. I hope this is fun for you because it's fun for me. There are in basically every rule system, like certain interactions. Well, if I use this spell with this thing, it creates something that kind of feels to everyone a little illogical, but it does this amazing effect. These kind of like rules interaction power gaming that maybe people might call, I don't know, cheesing. I think cheese is something where, you might draw a different line than building effective characters.
Well, let me give you 2 examples from my recent play experience that I think are sort of illustrative, right? And one is me from a brief campaign that I played a couple of years ago, and one as a player that was in one of my long-running Eberron campaigns. So you may have heard me talk about this before, but I love a Gish. I love a muscle wizard. They're a lot of fun. And I think the ultimate rules for the Githyanki ended up being different, but when the Githyanki playtest came out, or the Unearthed Arcana document, they had a lot of proficiencies. They had proficiencies in medium armor and great swords and long swords and bows and all kinds of shit. And so immediately I was like, well, muscle wizard. So I made a Githyanki wizard that fought with a greatsword and used the True Strike cantrip, and had a owl familiar that would use flyby attack to give the Githyanki advantage on his attack rolls whenever he swung that big stupid greatsword. This annoyed my DM to no amount, but 2 things. One, it would have been better if he just cast spells. That would have been a much, much better use of his actions. And 2, enemies just started shooting the owl, which is entirely fair. But that was power gaming, right? That was a clear example of power gaming. Similarly, I had a player in a 5e game make a kobold fighter, because kobolds get, or they used to get, I think they actually changed
Fury
this.
Of
they
the
used
Small?
to get
No, that's goblins.
some kind of like wolf pack tactics thing.
Oh yeah,
something
pack
where, like,
tactics. They get
pack
advantage. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they removed it. But anyway, basically, if he was standing next to somebody, he got advantage on every single attack roll. This was super annoying to me. But ultimately, it was not that big of a deal because he was still a kobold fighter, and it would have, the wizard ultimately ended up being more impactful in most battles. But these are both sort of 5e specific examples of power gaming that I think illustrate both like what's possible and also why it's not a big deal necessarily.
Right. Yeah. No, I think, if I'm coming to a big conclusion here, it's that we as dungeon masters, right, should be less concerned with players creating, characters that do fun things in combat, and more concerned, are these characters engaged in an interesting narrative, right?
The thing is about both those characters is they were interesting and fun, right? They were not like my Dazrag the Exile, my Githyanki wizard was one of my favorite characters of all time. He was great. The kobold fighter Snikt was, beloved by everyone in the party. He's again, my friend who played this character chose him because he wanted to get advantage. He chose this race class combination because he wanted advantage on all his attacks. But he ended up making a very memorable and fun and interesting character that was not ultimately, mechanically game breaking.
Here's an example, not from my personal experience, but one from a friend's, and that's also very popular online, which is probably the most known power gamey combination in 5th edition, is the Hexadin, or the Hexasorcidin, right?
Yes.
Where you multi-class between Hexblade, Warlock, Paladin, and maybe even a little Sorcerer, right? This is building on the fact that Paladin Smite is probably the best ability in the game at direct combat, at dealing damage to enemies. And if you combine these classes, you're good at fighting. Plus, you solve a lot of the problems that people are like, I want to play a fighter who's good at talking. Because guess what? You have charisma out the wazoo.
And spells.
And you have spells that you don't have to just burn for smiting. You could save one to do an interesting thing, like heal. You have great saves. You have great defense. Anyway, so the Hexadin is very good at things. And, we could consider someone who might make a Hexadin being like, well, the point of this Hexadin is to make a character that hurts things very well. Okay, I would say that's not very interesting, but, the 2 classes together, someone who starts with an oath to a god and then somehow forms a pact with a fiend, that to me is like classic fodder for some role-playing and narrative and storytelling experiences that are going to be great. How is this character going to navigate between their oath and having a pact with an outsider? This is going to give me tons of opportunity to make them make difficult choices and give them story hooks and stuff like that. And if a player could easily come up with such a cool story as to why this is happening.
I mean, this is a particularly good example, I think, because the Paladin and the Warlock are kind of thematically opposed.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like you just said, that's not actually an obstacle if the player is willing to explore like what it means to be a Paladin with an oath who has also made a deal with a patron. And there are lots of patrons that might not even be particularly challenging or conflict with a standard oath and faith. But I think that's interesting, right? I think a lot of people do pick it because mechanically it's cool. Like Matt said, I mean, this is part of what's frustrating is like what's appealing about the Hexadin is that it fills in a lot of
right.
stuff that should be possible in other classes.
You should be able to make a fighter that does Nova damage occasionally and is also good at talking, but you can't.
But you can't. The other problem is that the Warlock is just like such a, it's WotC's baby. It's got so many cool things, so much cool flavor.
Right.
It's so mechanically effective.
Tapping the roof of the car. Yeah, you can fit so much narrative in here, so many builds, so many concepts into this one class. Yeah.
But like the Sorkadin or the Hexadin or the Hexasorkadin, these are the most, I think, I would describe them as probably the most power gamey characters. The most obvious power game character in 5th edition is this. There are other things you can kind of do, but nothing really compares to really just getting Paladin and then finding some other way to get more spell slots. But the Hexadin is the best example of it.
Yeah, it solves a lot of problems. For example, if in my campaign I had a Hexadin and a fighter, you want to hear DM tip number 7 or whatever we're on is, you want to be on the lookout, especially as your players gain levels and get maybe above 3rd or 5th. Are there any characters mechanically that are completely outshining other characters at what they do? So, for example, if in my campaign I had a Hexadin and a regular champion fighter, I might be a little concerned that the Hexagon is going to do everything that fighter can do and more. And I might do something like, all right, you get an extra action surge per rest, and that would go most of the way to solving these problems. Or it might be something like, I want to make sure this fighter gets magic items that solve the problem of, I don't have an interesting magic thing to do. Well, if they have a headband of disguise self and a magic sword that can shoot a fireball once in a while, they're going to feel pretty on par with this Hexadin.
Yeah. I mean, magic items are a good way to sort of balance this out. But like, it's also worth bearing in mind that, a well-built straight class barbarian with reckless attack and great weapon mastery can do just like oodles of damage. And similarly, a adequately built Battlemaster fighter with a 2-handed weapon and action surges will, once per short rest, do a truly irresponsible amount of damage. The only problem is, they'll probably feel on par with that Hexadin unless the adventuring day becomes too long or isn't long enough, depending.
And then this is DM tip number 12. Which is when dealing with power gaming, is you need to think about the way you're structuring the situation and then tactical combats and things that are you encouraging a certain type of power gaming over another. 2 quick examples, right? If all the encounters take place on a single day and the players always have time to short rest, that Hexadin always getting their spell slots back is going to be much more powerful than if you didn't do that. Similarly, if you design combats where there's never a place for the rogue to hide, that rogue that might have been completely standard and optimized suddenly becomes underpowered. The bigger example is something like the perception skill, right? Are you like, why are all my players putting all their expertise and maximum points and things into the perception skill? What's going on? Are they min-maxing? No, the way you run the game, and I think the way a lot of dungeon masters roll the game, is that perception is like 70% of skill checks. Maybe you should change that.
And with regard to Dungeons and Dragons and 5e specifically, a lot of this comes down to the adventuring day, and this is not to blame any DM or anything. I don't think that...
Yeah, blaming the adventuring day is saying we're blaming something that is poorly designed in the system.
Yes. It really, like, per their own rules, Wizards believes that you should be having 3 to 7 encounters per adventuring day. I don't know any dungeon master who sticks to that. It's simply too much. It's simply too many encounters to run and keep track of before. Nobody does that. It's just not practical, which means everybody's taking long rests more often than they are technically supposed to, which means that classes with limited resources are more powerful.
Yeah, that's the problem. I think there are solutions in optional rules, like I think it's called like the grueling or deadly rest rules or something in the Dungeon Master, where a night's rest counts as a short rest, a week's rest counts as a long rest. If you don't want to go that far, this could be putting more encounters in before players have a chance to rest. Or it could be, I don't want to deal with this. Let me give the people in the party who don't get things from long rests cool things to make up for that fact, right? Like an extra action surge to the fighter, like a cloak of invisibility for the rogue, etc. Okay, so I think I have like a big, some really big picture points that I want to run by you, Rob.
Okay.
And I'm drawing here from Josh Sawyer's points. Dungeons and Dragons has a history in wargaming, right, which is sort of a competition. But I would say more broadly, expanding on this point, that most tabletop role-playing games, maybe not all, maybe not like a superhero game, but most, from Vampire the Masquerade to Shadowrun to Dungeons & Dragons, rely on specialization, right? This very few characters are good at everything equally. Therefore, basically all characters are minimizing some things and maximizing being good at other things. And this is actually, I think, the fun thing that a lot of people like about role-playing games. My character's the Whisper, and I can talk to ghosts. Well, I'm the kick in the door person who starts the heist. Okay, to give an example from Blades in the Dark, right? Mm-hmm. We each have our specializations. That's good, right? You should encourage specialization, but encourage specialization that works as a party and works with the plots and situations you are giving your players, right? If all you ever give is combats, then players that are good and specialized at non-combat spells and skills are going to feel under-optimized.
That's a great point, and it reminds me, again, this place is... part of why this conversation is interesting and why it's coming up again is because we're dealing with the origin point is a video game, right? A CRPG, which has a dungeon master technically, but it is a program, right? It is a program that even with lots and lots of inputs can only respond in a certain number of ways to player input. And what that means is that it's sort of like necessarily inflexible. And so again, going back to the original article, the Mr. Valentine's article, even though I think it's a good impulse to say, don't over optimize, don't focus on your end state because you won't be having fun. The game is designed to challenge you, right? There are combat encounters and you don't know how hard they are. And it's not fun it's actually very not fun to lose in D&D because it takes a long time and it's frustrating because of dice rolls. There are games that it is fun to lose in. I do not believe that Dungeons & Dragons is one of them. So you want to be some level of optimized. So as you are playing through this game, you have a better chance of success. This is different, like what Matt was just discussing, if you're playing in a real game with a DM who can, if you are a character that is optimized for talking or for out-of-combat spells or for dungeon delving rather than just combat, can accommodate that. And you as a DM can encourage some, if not unoptimized, differently optimized characters.
I wholeheartedly agree, Rob. And to build on that, I have two of the most awful words ever combined in the English language for you. Josh Whedon. So we all...
Why are we bringing up the Joss?
Okay, all right. We all hate Josh Whedon. He's a terrible human being. But in many of his shows, right, he makes often the cast of characters of, let's say, the ship Serenity and the series Firefly are all very good at one or two things. And in that show or several of his other shows, he puts those characters in situations where they're doing the thing they're not good at. And when you're the dungeon master, right, you can easily adjust what you think the DC of things should be. And if you have players, for example, who are min-maxers and stuff like that, a fun thing to do is if you have the dark edgelord Sorkadin, who wears a mask and doesn't talk, right, that person is stuck negotiating the ransom while the bumbling wizard with an 8 dexterity has to do, a sneaking task, right? Getting your characters out of their sort of role and comfort zone once in a while, right, can be a fun anecdote to aggressive min-maxing and optimization, right? And that is, I think, if you were talking about it's not fun to fail in D&D, I completely agree. However, this type of kind of comedic bottle episode.
It's not fun to fail combat, specifically.
Yeah.
Other things are okay and kind of fun to fail, but combats are not fun because they take too long, and it often feels kind of arbitrary based on dice rolls when you are losing.
Right.
But other failures can be entertaining.
Right.
Depending.
So this type of, I think, failure or again, let your players surprise you and come up with interesting solutions and give them advantage and all that kind of stuff to let them succeed at something they're not good at, put in kind of the fish out of water situation. I've found that when I've done that and then the party comes back together, it was like, we're never leaving each other again. That was a bad idea. They have a new, the wizard, the bumbling wizard has a new appreciation for the rogue, and the Hexadin Sorcelok, who can only hit things with his cursed longsword, has a new appreciation for the rogue and the bard.
Yeah.
Something.
No, I think this is a good example, and I again, you can no longer do this as much as you could in previous editions, but you do want to maybe zing them a little bit for over optimization. If somebody has put 100% of their eggs in a single basket, you do want to maybe put them in a situation where again, you can't do this anymore, but they dumped their intelligence down to 6 and suddenly they're the only one in the room where they have to talk to the ambassador. That's just, that's good clean TTRPG fun.
Right. It's good storytelling too, is what I'm saying is Josh Whedon for all of his many sins, both in fiction and in real life, understands that having that happen is a good thing sometimes in a story.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to make Xander fight, and you got to make Buffy, act normal, and
right, exactly.
and that's a fun episode.
You've got to stick Mal in the engine room, and you've got to stick Kaylee in the pilot's chair, and
that's right.
Yeah, that's where you go.
That's fun.
I think at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, as a dungeon master, what level of optimization, power gaming, min-maxing sort of makes you uncomfortable? Or to put it another way, what are you comfortable restricting? Because I think at the end of the day, we're all restricting probably something. You're like,
Yeah.
hey, you can't be a Yuan Ti. We don't have that in my campaign world.
Right.
Or
right,
your
right.
reason could be, I don't want you to be a winged elf or an Aarakocra because I don't want players to start with flying. And so decide where those boundaries are for yourself.
This has been a very pro power gaming podcast. We have, it's definitely been a power gaming apologia, but I do want to say that it is very possible for a power gamer to ruin your game. I've played in games where people with optimal characters both annoyed the DM and basically overshadowed every single other person in the party, and usually spent a lot of table time doing so. It often in the past involved just rolling a lot of dice, which took up a long term. So I don't want to make it sound like power gaming is a non-issue. I think it is much less likely for that to happen in 5th edition, but that doesn't mean that you can't have somebody who has looked up a really obnoxious guide somewhere and brought a character that is substantially better than everybody else's and is making them feel bad. So the answer is much the same as it is for a lot of our advice is, work with your group.
Talk to your
them,
players.
Make sure that
make
everybody's
characters
on the same page.
together, right?
Yes. Yes.
Ask yourself, what is the thing that is going to make me give a shit about someone having something that is quote unquote annoying or broken, right? Because Dungeons and Dragons abilities that characters and players have are all about breaking the game. The fighter can take 2 actions in a turn. The wizard can change the world with their mind, right? These are all broken things.
Yeah.
But they're fun. We all agree they're fun.
Yeah.
So figure out what are the things that beyond the basics that are breaking the game for you. Interrogate yourself. Ask yourself, am I giving a shit because this is a better character than I would make? Or is it because it's going to suck the fun out of the other people at the table? And if it's the second one, work with them. Talk with them. Talk with the other players. Work together to make a party that's fun.
I'll say that at the end of the day, I've known lots, again, Matt and I are both of this variety. I've known lots of people who loved to tinker with mechanics and who liked to make optimal, powerful characters, but they all loved to make interesting characters, which they then role played, and we had a good time gaming together, right? Like it has never been true, and again, the Stormwind fallacy is nearly 20 years old at this point. Never been true that if you're a power gamer that you don't like to role play, and I have encountered 1 or 2 people who clearly like had a build that was like I'm abusing a particularly like awkward part of the rules, and this is annoying. But there were just far fewer of them in my experience than people who were absolute number-brained crunch morons like myself, but who liked to play, who wanted to play an interesting character that was optimized in a specific way to be interesting.
And even with those, I would say to you, Dungeon Masters, even with those players that are like, all I've come here is with a combination of a build that does a cool thing. If that's all they have, that's still something, right?
That's something to work with. Yeah,
something
you can
to work with them, and try and work with those players. Oh, you're a druid lore bard, so you can get every spell and also turn into an animal. That's pretty cool. Let's come up with a cool concept that's going to fit in our heist-themed fantasy game for that, right? Let's talk about how you learned to be a druid, right? Or how you picked up your illusion magic, so we can have something to work with in this game. So think of those optimized builds, if they're, again, not past your tolerance, as, hey, this is this one player's way of expressing interest in my game, which... that's a beautiful thing. If you have someone who has interest, you got to accept it in all its forms.
Yeah. I think that's good advice.
Yeah.
There's more, obviously, to say about power gaming, but I think that for all of its flaws, I think that 5th edition has really taken the teeth out of this argument in a lot of ways. It's just there is a trade-off, there's a cost, but I think that it is just
it's a creature now with no teeth. There's nothing to sink your teeth into.
and again, I have my complaints about it, but I do think that it means that it is just much harder to power game in a way that impacts the fun of other players or of your DM. I think that it is very difficult to optimize in such a way that it becomes game breaking or unpleasant, and that is a good thing. Again, was the price too high? Possibly, but I do think it's nice that we don't have to have this conversation with such vociferousness. Like, kids, you just don't know what it was like in the forums on the early aughts. You don't know about those 3.5 builds. You don't know what people were doing out there.
It is nice. So yes, we do have a system where many expressions of cool fantasy heroes in our head cannot see the light of day because the rules are not there. But, the upside is it's fun to make a character that is good at things, and we just always want to be cautious not to punish players who are trying to make characters who are good at things. Being effective is fun, and for some people, that's maybe their only form of enjoyment. And for those people, let them have that enjoyment and bring them into a second form of fun that you can have. I think going back to our Wikipedia article, camaraderie, what were the other ones? Socialization, storytelling, atmosphere, right? Remember that if they've got the optimization down, introduce them to the other three according to the Bible.
Yes. Well, and I mean, ultimately it's about different styles of play, and the right game can accommodate all of them, and the right GM can as well. And that's I think that's the trick. Don't, if there's one final thought, it's like, don't balk immediately at power gaming. If somebody comes to the table and they're like, I want to make a Hexadin or a life cleric lore bard that has every skill, work with that. Maybe that's what they like to do, just like Matt said. And I think that you might be pleasantly surprised.
Break down the barrier in your mind between role play, ROLE, and role play, ROLL.
Oh, and how's our role player doing?
All right, Rob. Well, that's
thanks, Wit.
Thanks, Wit. Bonus for our Patreon listeners. Find out more about Wit at patreon.com/dungeonmasternone, or you can send us an email at dmofnone@gmail.com.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening, and keep rolling them dice.
Freedom of death, we got to fight the powers that be. Fight the power. 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 We got to fight the powers that be. As the rhythm's designed to bounce with health and that the rhymes designed to fill your mind.
Oh, and how's our role player doing?